Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar. This is Alan Salmon speaking, and it's nice to be back after the summer rest. Got an interesting webinar for you today, but before we do, I need to deal with some administration errors. I'm pleased to welcome back our good friend Marilyn Benninger, who's my backup today. She's very rested, having spent a week in Tuscany and flew back on Sunday just to be with us. Seriously though, she is your go-to person for technical issues and for questions. Your microphone is muted for obvious reasons. You're welcome to take notes, but be aware that within 10 days of today, Marilyn will be sending you a package, and in it you will get the recording of the webinar, my extensive teaching notes, the files that I'm going to use, and the questions that you ask. And speaking of questions, you ask them in the chat window. And at the end of today's webinar, Marilyn will send us the questions. We will answer them, and the question and answers will be in your package. And finally, in your package will be your CPD certificate. For those of you that are new, the way this works is 4 times today, Marilyn is going to stop us and put up a polling question. That's a multiple choice question. You don't have to get the answer right, but you do have to select an answer and click on submit, because that's our attendance. And if you get 70 recorded as being in attendance for 75 of the polling questions, you will get a CPD certificate for 1 verifiable hour. If not, it'll be 1 non-verifiable hour. And now, Marilyn, can you put up the first poll, please?
Buonasera, all. It's pleased to be back. Your first poll question is just coming up on screen. We'd like to know who's attending today and what version of Excel you're using. You can select one choice, please. And they're on your screen: Office 365, Excel 2019, Excel 2016, 2013, or if you're not sure or have something different than the above, that's your last choice there. Everybody's quick off the mark this morning, Alan. We're already at 95%, and that's when we close our polls, which I'm going to do now in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Thanks for your votes. I'm sharing the results with you now, Alan.
I like the percentage of Office 365 at 40% because I'm going to do a couple of examples of using Office 365 at the end of my seminar. All right, can I have my screen back, please?
You have the comm.
Today's topic for me is security. And of course, internet security with Excel and everything else is very important. So I have some facts for you before I get into the Excel part of it. And I have to tell you a funny story about us being off the grid. Back in the spring, we were off the grid from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. Fortunately, we could work on our iPads, but the interesting thing was all of the school kids were out in the street playing, and all of the adults were out on the street, meaning they couldn't play with their stuff, so that's where they went. So I assume most of you are part of this. That doesn't mean high speed, of course. And look at the right one. 46% of you admit to using their phones while using the washroom. That's my joke for the day. And how do they use the internet? Well, there you go. Laptop, mobile, tablet, smart TV, voice controlled, meaning a phone. And the seniors are very involved. Take a look at that. Interesting, the number of Canadians that are comfortable, and only 55% on the US site. And finally, 80% are, of course, concerned with online security. So let's put that to bed and start looking at security when it comes to Excel. So here we go. Now, before I get into dealing with security, I want to take you backstage, and I'm going to go to I'm just pulling up a new Excel file. There we go. So what I've done is I've gone to File Options, and I'm going to go down here to the Trust Center. Before we can get into this, we need to go over here and click on Trust Center Settings. And when I do, I get this list of things, and there's only a couple that I use. For example, you can tell Office who trusted publishers are, like Microsoft and so on. I don't bother. When it comes to trusted locations, these are the default that come with Excel, which is fine. I don't bother using trusted documents, and I'll tell you why in a minute. When it comes to add-ins, I don't do anything here. When it comes to ActiveX settings, prompt me before enabling all controls with minimum restrictions. In other words, I want to know what Excel is going to do before I go there. Macro settings, for those of you that are using macros, is key. And you've got 4 choices. Disable all macros without notification. If you turn that on, the macros won't work, even if it's an XM file. I have it set to disable all macros with notification. And the reason for that is that from time to time, I am getting Excel files as an email attachment or as a shared attachment. Some of them have macros in them. If it's legit, I need the macros. So up pops a message, and I look at who it's from, and then click on the overwrite. Protected view we'll get to in a minute. Message bar, key, show the message bar in all applications when active content such as ActiveX controls and macros has been blocked. External content, I go with the default. I don't block, oh, sorry. Here, I can block Excel files with different extensions. So you'll notice that I haven't blocked anything here. If I did this, Excel 2000 and let's go down here to 97, do that. Then it would block any files with the .xls, which was the first file format. I can't remember when I last got an Excel 97 to 2003. Yes, I do. Marilyn, I've received a couple from you. So that's that. So let's move on to this file. And one of the keys for me is encrypting a workbook with a password. I want to make it difficult for people to get in unless they're supposed to get in. So notice I've gone to File Info. And here I have 4 things. Protect Workbook is where we're going to go. Inspect workbook. That's interesting because that will get me behind the scenes. And if we inspect this document, it's going to show me any comments. It's going to show me hidden stuff, personal information, who created the workbook, when was it last changed, and so on. Back to here, check for issues. And here we go. Vendor history, for those of you on Office 365 and on OneDrive, you can actually go back and see all of the files that you saved. So if I have a file and I make a change, I can go back and see how it was before the change. And I use that a fair bit. Manage workbooks, nothing there. So let's go to the key thing, protect workbook. And I'm going to encrypt it with a password. No big deal. I'll use my standard password that I use for training. And there we go. So now if I save this file and open it, I'm going to pop the password thing and I enter my password. And some people wonder, how do you get rid of a password? Well, really simple. There's my password. I do this, delete this, and I do OK, and I save it. Password is encrypted with a 128 key. So next, we're going to go here to here. And one of the things that I will always do when I'm doing a workbook or worksheet with a client is control or try to limit the number of mistakes they make. So here's a sample workbook that I created for a client. A little out of date, but I have the year to date. I have Q3 and Q4. And the client needs to update these particular cells. So I'm going to select them. And I'm going to select this one as well by holding down the control key. And then I'm going to right mouse click and go to the edit menu down here, or sorry, format cells down here. And notice protection over here. I'm going to take that off so those cells will remain unlocked. I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to go to review, protect the worksheet, and understand protect worksheet will only protect this one. If I wanted to do Hutchison and so on, I'd have to do it separately. So I click on it. And I could enter a password. I'm not going to do it. But I'm going to allow users to select lock cells and unlock cells. And you may have a question about that, and I'll answer it momentarily. So now, I want to update this. Not a problem. I want to update this. So every cell other than those colored cells will get that message. Now, why did I allow people, would I allow people to view cells that they can't change? Interesting question. And the answer is I may want them to see the formula that's in that cell so they understand the layout, but they can't screw it up. That's one component of protecting data in a worksheet. The second one is also in the Review tab under Protect Workbook. Simpler this time. Password again. Protect the structure. Notice that I have that checked. Protect the windows. I don't ever do that. Now, what that means is this. If I go up here to Insert, notice it's all grayed out. So no user can insert anything. They can't delete sheets. They can't delete rows. They can't delete columns. They can't copy and so on. So if you really want security, then there are two components to it. One, to lock the cells in a worksheet after you've unlocked the cells that you want people to use. The second is to lock the whole workbook. So let's move on to something that you may have seen. And this was changed. It used to be that you could mark a file as read-only. Microsoft, a couple of versions ago, changed it to marked as final. And how do we do that? Well, again, we go to the backstage under File, Protect Workbook, and notice down here, Mark as Final. Now, understand what this means. Well, I took it off. There we go. Okay. An author has marked this workbook as final to discourage editing. So I sent it to Marilyn, and she said, Alan's wrong, edit anyway. And she's in. So there's no protection here. So to me, marking a document as final is a red flag. And I do it on many of my worksheets. And the red flag is this. When I see that, I know that a month ago I said it was final. If it isn't, then I undo it. And the final thing, and I want to spend about 12 minutes on this, is the issue of sharing workbooks. Well, first of all, sending a workbook. And I suspect you all know the primary way is to go to File, go to Share, Email, send it, and so on. But for those of you that are on Office 365, you have a number of other options. So let's deal with Office 365. So let me pull up my Office 365. And I'm in SharePoint. So you notice that I have a whole bunch of folders. And I go in here to here, and I'm going to open up this file. And I'm going to open up it in the app. Come on. There it comes. Now, what you're looking at is the numbers for the Accounting Technology Seminar Series that we're going to launch next week, as a matter of fact. Now, the beauty of this is because I have it in SharePoint, anybody else who has access to this SharePoint, like Marilyn, could actually go in here and edit it. So I use SharePoint as a way of as a way of online storage because I can access this file from any other computer and my iPad, which I do all the time. Now, speaking of Office 365, I want to go here. Actually, I want to go here. Now, what you're looking at here is the SharePoint for K2E Canada, and you notice the same thing. Now, Marilyn does have access to all of this, but there's another interesting part of Office 365, and let me go here and call this up. So this is what Marilyn and I see when we go into Office 365. And I want to go up here, and a little application down here as Teams. And I'd love to know how many of you are using Teams. We live by it. It comes as part of the Office 365 subscription. And it's really our internal way of communicating. So notice it's about to load. There we go. So notice we have different teams set up: webinars, tour, survey, and so on. Let's go to webinars. And notice the message here. This came from Marilyn on the 20th. So in here is all of our comments about the webinars as they go. And here are all of the files dealing with webinars, and there's a pile of them. And the beauty of this is that I can go in here and open up this and look up any one of these files and work on them. Marilyn could also work on them at the same time, and so could Ward. So we use this a great deal, right, Marilyn?
Yeah, we absolutely rely on it, Alan, and the thread that you pulled up was me in Tuscany. So yeah, anywhere you have internet access, you can certainly be doing work and contributing to the team.
And I also use Teams in my other company. And just doing an Office 365 promo for 30 seconds, we're a great believer in it. I actually have two subscriptions, the K2's subscription and the ASI subscription, and that gives us 10 versions of everything. So for example, Nancy and I use 8 versions of Outlook on different stuff and so on. The other interesting thing, and let me see if I can pull this up quickly, is a new product that Microsoft launched last week called My Analytics. And it's pretty easy to set up. And it's really kind of behind the scenes analyzing what I do. So this month, I've dealt with 64 people, Ward, Nancy, and so on, out of a total of 261 that I have. If we go to home, look at this, focus. In other words, I was highly focused for 88% of my work week. Now, quiet days, that's a day when I don't do anything on the internet, 0. And we could explore my 4-week pattern, 4-week trend. Well-being. Quiet hours kept on 0 days. And my network. So there's a new addition that I'm beginning to play with. Now I want to do a wrap by going back to sharing. So let's go back to here. What do we mean by sharing? Well, I can go up here to Files, as I said, and I can click on Share through the cloud and so on. But I can also share this file so other people can work on it. So how do I do that? Well, I've got an icon here, Share Your Workbook, Legacy, and I'll explain what that is, and I'm going to go here. Now, with Office 365, I can share any files by sending you a link. However, the old-fashioned way I still use. So use the old Share Workbook feature instead of the new co-authoring experience. Yep. All right, so when I share a workbook with Marilyn, I want to keep change history for 30 days, could be longer. I want to update the changes when the file is changed or is saved. I could do it automatically. And then somebody has to referee, since it's my file, ask me what changes when both of us have done changes and there's conflict there. So that's not a problem. So now, if Marilyn had access to it, she would do it. And then I would be able to update the changes. So Marilyn, on that note, I am done except for my last poll.
Great information as always, Alan, and we've got quite a few questions that have come in. Folks, you will receive those with your package in a few days. So this is Alan's second poll question and second of 4 scheduled for today. Asking what formatting techniques have you used, and you get multiple choice here. Select all that apply. Flash fill, slicers, end of month function, inquiry, or maybe none of the above. Everybody is still quick off the mark. Thank you, folks. We're already at 90%. So I'm going to count you down from 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. I'm closing the poll, and I'm going to share the results.
Oh, you're going to be astonished next week when I show you flash fill and slicers. End of the month, I use a little bit. Inquire is a new function that's only been around a couple of versions, as is flash fill. Slicers have been around since 2010. Thanks, Marilyn. And now I'm excited for you to introduce a new attendee, or a new presenter, I should say, and that is Teddy Sullivan from Xero. Sorry, Teddy.
No problem at all.
So I've switched controls to you, Teddy. Let me know when you get that.
Yep, so let me show my screen. Are you able to see what I'm looking at here?
Perfect.
Yep.
Thanks so much. You have the comm.
Sounds great. So thank you guys very much for the opportunity to present here today. Let me make sure I'm showing as much of my screen as possible. And yeah, so my presentation today is going to be about half an hour, and I'm going to be spending the first couple of minutes going through a slide deck, and then I'm going to do a demonstration inside of the product. So yeah, in a couple of minutes, we're going to do the first poll, but yeah, let me get started here. So yeah, this is Xero. So this is a picture of me and one of my coworkers at Xero, Avi Dutt, one of the partner consultants on the team. But yeah, so I joined with Xero about 3 years ago, spent my first year in Denver, and was the first person to cross the Canadian border and help establish the Canada team about 2 years and 2 months ago. So the team has grown from about 4 on the ground to over 30, and with the acquisition of Hubdock, over 130. So very exciting to see the team grow here in Canada, as we are much bigger in some other markets, but as we grow here in Canada, it's really exciting. So what is Xero? Xero is beautiful accounting software. Founded 13 years ago in New Zealand. We founded Cloud Accounting, and it was founded by our co-founder, Rod Drury, who decided there must be a better way to exchange information with my accountant. He was frustrated with all of the paper, and so him and his accountant actually founded Xero together. So our global impact is rising. So Mentioned that we started 13 years ago. As of our most recent public statements, we have over 1.8 million subscribers and are global online leaders outside of the United States. So very exciting. And our other big markets are in New Zealand and Australia and the UK. So the Commonwealth tie makes sense that we're having a lot of success in our early days here in Canada. So our purpose here at Xero is to improve the lives of small businesses, their advisors, and communities around the world. So very much aligns with myself. My father's a small business owner, and growing up, certainly something that I'm passionate about. And I really see this as such a great opportunity for the practitioners that jump out ahead of it and take advantage of some of the efficiencies that exist. So why should you use Xero? So again, I think a lot of people have started to dabble with cloud and they see some of the advantages on the connectivity side, not having to send backups and downloads. There's a big advantage, better way to exchange information with your clients. And ultimately, the data is safer online, and that is something that is a big misconception, is people are a little concerned about security. But when you kind of break it down and think about the fact that companies like Xero, our livelihood depends on data security. So at the end of the day, we're a lot more focused on this type of thing than you are on your personal computer. And clicking one bad link in an email can be just as costly as anything else that you do. So it's important to recognize that and to be articulating that properly to your clients so that they're not as fearful of some of these opportunities. So Xero's platform, we're very well known as a great bookkeeping solution, but the truth is that really does undersell what we do. We have a working paper solution and reporting modules for year-end reporting, month-end reporting, quarter-end reporting, a lot of flexibility in those reporting tools. And then the other concept is we have a totally open API. So what that means is that other softwares are able to build to our API and thus eliminate the need for the duplication of efforts in multiple softwares. So that is really, it's the single source of truth, as you see in the middle, the shared ledger, the concept that I can enter information in one place and it gets shared in a couple of other places that information is needed. So really an exciting opportunity when you think about it, and trying to create a more efficient workflow for both the accounting firms and for the small business owners. So I mentioned the Hubdock acquisition a little bit earlier. Xero acquired Hubdock in August of 2018 for 70 million US dollars, so about 93-ish million Canadian dollars. So very exciting, not only because of the fact that Hubdock is an amazing tool that helps firms better accumulate and store documents for their clients. Hubdock is a document fetching tool. It can fetch bank statements, utility bills, ultimately any online platform. Hubdock would have the capability of building an integration and a connection with. So it can go fetch bills, store them, and make it a lot easier for small businesses to get that information, those documents, to their accountants and bookkeepers. So and an amazing tool that really speeds up Xero's mission of what we call code-free accounting. So the idea that actual reconciliation or selecting the accounts can be streamlined, automated bank rules and things of that nature that I will jump into in the demo in a little bit. But the other reason this is so exciting from my perspective is that this shows Xero's commitment to the Canadian market. Hubdock has the most penetration in North America for their business, and so really an exciting opportunity for my eyes as far as Xero showing that the Canadian market, we're going to be here for the long haul, and it's truly a really exciting opportunity both for Xero, and it was a great option for Hubdock as well because our great people over there. This is one of my favorite slides, and the reason I love that one is because it really stresses Xero's mission, which again, we're trying to and bookkeepers and accountants. And the way we do that is by connecting them. And whenever we sell a subscription of Xero to a small business directly, is do you work with an accountant or bookkeeper? And at the end, we call our advisor directory, because this is all else equal, have a 50-50 shot of seeing their 5th birthday. But if they work with an accountant or bookkeeper, the odds go up to 85%. So, that obviously makes good news for the small business with an advisor, but Xero, right? If those small businesses last longer. So rise in this. And I think that this is where some of our competition has missed the mark, suggesting that there is software so simple you don't need an accountant, because ultimately no software can tell a small business owner how to code transactions correctly and how to properly set up their books, because it isn't that easy. And that's why people get their bookkeeping and accounting designations, because they do need that support from people like you guys. So really an exciting opportunity. Ultimately, we see in the long term that things that can be automated will. And so the opportunity to take advantage of this in the short term is great for those that get out ahead of it. And so, yeah, we're excited to kind of jump into some of the details here. And I wanted to keep my presentation to about 5 minutes, and I think I did pretty good. So the last thing I want to say before I jump into the actual product demo is that we do have a Xero Roadshow coming up next month. And I'm going to hit exit here so we can I'm gonna list all of the cities from east to west. So we will be in Halifax, Montreal, Ottawa, Newmarket, Toronto, Oakville, London, Winnipeg, Calgary, Edmonton, Kelowna, Vancouver, Victoria. So I believe that is east to west, all 13 cities. Exit here and check my work. So yeah, I did accidentally say Victoria before Kelowna, but I corrected myself, so I think I passed. Without further ado, jump into my product demo. So whenever you create—
Hey Teddy, before you start that, maybe
question.
Yeah, let's see where everybody's at in the room. That's always a good thing to do. Perfect. So folks, you should see your polling question there. Pretty simple. Please select, do you have clients that are currently using Xero? Yes, no, maybe you're not sure. Or maybe you don't have clients at this point and you're an internal accountant who's in our audience. Wow, already. Thanks for your quick responses. I'm counting you down from 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. I'm going to share those results. Do you see those results there, Teddy?
I sure do. So it looks like 2% using, 49% no, 43% not applicable, and 5% not sure.
Yeah, lots of interest then from seeing a new product. You have the comm.
Yep, that's awesome. I love it. That sounds fantastic. So hopefully some great tools here that you see that some of your clients might get from. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time looking through this first portal, but this is what we call Xero HQ. So this is the accountant's portal of Xero. So this is where you would add new clients, and there's some insights. You can set up report templates. You can send out questionnaires to your clients. You can invite staff in. But for purposes of today's demo, I'm going to get right into a client. Create an accountant's edition of Xero. Everyone has access to what we call our demo company. So I'm going to come over here and reset the demo company. It's going to reset automatically every 28 days, but I did a demo earlier this morning, so I want to reset it to make sure I have some good fake information for reconciliation. So once I click that, seconds later, I'm inside of my demo company. So this first page here is what we call the Xero dashboard. As you log into different screens in Xero, you'll see these short videos. I am going to X them out, but feel free to start watching those if you do create a trial of Xero and start poking around a little bit. So this first page here is definitely geared towards the small business owner. Most of the functionality I talk about today is going to be geared towards the bookkeeper or accountant. So we're geared towards that small business owner. So this account watch list here is a really handy tool. It's totally customizable. So one account that a lot of practitioners like to put in here is HST payable, so that they can keep an eye on that throughout the quarter, so there are no big surprises at the end of the quarter. If I scroll down here, I can see invoices owed to you, bills you need to pay. So again, some really basic cash flow tools here with some simplified language for that small business owner, so they can get an idea of when they need to have account information in there, when they need to have money in their account, excuse me. But if I click Edit Dashboard, I might have bills you need to pay come up a little higher because they're bad at paying our bills. So I want that to be more top of mind, and I can save those changes. So pretty simple to start to add some additional information here. But let's jump into the reconciliation feature. So on this screen here, on the left here, we have information spilling in directly from the bank. And on the right-hand side, we have Xero getting to work. So there's a couple of different ways you can get your bank transactions into Xero. So you can link your bank account directly with Xero, fill in automatically every morning. All of the posted transactions from the previous day would come into automatically, or you have the option to import your bank statement. So if they're using a really small local bank that doesn't have the ability to connect, you still have the ability to get that information in. On the right-hand side, I mentioned this is Xero getting to work. So the green match here indicates that I already have an invoice for the same amount to the same vendor, so I can click the OK button, going reconciled. This second transaction here is for Smart Agency, and I know that I have some invoices for, so I'm going to search for Smart in the search bar here, click enter, and I can see that there's 2 invoices that this payment relates to. So I'm going to select both of those bills, click OK. My accounts payable is, and those transactions have been reconciled off of my bank statement as well. For this third transaction, City Limousine, I know that I've got some invoices. I'm not sure which one this relates to. So none of them match up to $100, as you can see on the right side here. So what I'm going to do is just select the oldest one and make a partial payment. So if I click part payment here, I'm going to reduce what's owed from $250 down to $150, click split, and reconcile that to payment as well. So as far as workflow is concerned in Xero, you're going to spend a bit of time on this reconcile page first, reconciling any transactions that have already been created in the system. So you're going to click OK to any invoices and bills that match and things of that nature. So this bill here is some automation. Xero is essentially saying this is how you've coded from this vendor in the past. So perhaps that's how you want to code this one. If there's been some in the past by the client, we can turn this functionality off at the bottom here by clicking that tick box, and then it won't start to fill it out. So, but can be helpful if good accounting and good bookkeeping has been done from the start. I'm going to show you a better screen to reconcile that transaction in a second. So let's leave that one alone, but I could click the OK button here and reconcile that. So I see another smart match here. I'm going to click OK. This one here, Swanston. I know I have something for Swanston. If I search for Swanston, I can see payment was a penny off. Okay, so if I select that, rather than having to open that invoice and change by a penny and then come back and let the smart match stay, I'm just going to send that to a minor adjustments account for 1 penny, since it's not worth the time for a penny. And so some really handy functionality here. And this is the screen you might have your client doing some of the reconciliation work. But if you're doing the work yourself, I highly recommend you start here, you reconcile anything you have created, and then you visit this cash coding screen. This is a screen you're not likely to give your clients access to. It is the same transactions as I was looking at on the reconcile screen, but it's displayed in the format of an Excel spreadsheet. So I'm able to sort the transactions by any of these headers. So you can see that the coding has started to already some of the transactions, and that relates to that 7-11 rule that I've already. So as far as what this screen can be useful for, it can be really, really useful for clients that come to you with 12 months of bank statements and say, and what a lot of firms will do is potentially import all 12 months of bank statements, use this cash coding screen to create some bank rules, and then they're able to either process their year end in Xero, our report templates, our working papers solution, or export the information out of Xero and bring it over to Caseware to finalize their year end. So a couple of, but this is a really fast way to code transactions. So I'm going to create one bankroll here for parking transactions, since it seems that that would be beneficial. You can see Xero starts to guess what type of you'd want for the role because of how I selected to create a bankroll for that transaction. But I'm going to make things a little bit more open-ended here. So I'm going to say, rather than the pay equals Central City Parking, I'm going to say that it contains park. Here, as far as the context is concerned, I'm going to let it get dictated within the actual transaction. The automatically allocated item, this is really handy for a couple of situations. To be maybe a loan. So let's say there's $1,000 going to principal every month, and the remaining amount goes to interest, depending how many days are in the month. Fixed amount to the principal, and the remaining 100% going to interest account. Also, maybe a phone and internet situation. So maybe phone is a fixed amount every month on usage, and so we can have phone. We can send $60 to phone, and the remaining 100% going to internet. For this, I'm going to send it all to motor vehicle expense. You'll have to forgive the bad tax code here. We'll pretend we're in Manitoba. And so we'll come down here. We have some options for the reference. I'm going to leave it alone. And I can apply this to all of my bank accounts or just one. I'm going to say all bank accounts. And then lastly, I need to give my rule a name. So I'm going to call it parking, and then I'm going to add the account code that the transaction is going to. Click save. And you can see that all the transactions that it trips up are now going to have coding. So that's going to include the 5 up here, but also the 2 down here for Parkside Kiosk. For the first time you do your work in Xero, I would highly recommend spending some time creating the bankrolls, because % of transactions within small businesses are repeatable. And so you're able to really streamline. So if you're doing this once a year, once a quarter, once a month, even if you're importing the bank statements, some real serious efficiencies to be gained on this cash coding screen. And so here you run over everything that has a bankroll, and without ticking anything on the left, I can just click save and reconcile. And those 9 transactions are going to get reconciled in just a couple of seconds. So I can reconcile up to all transactions at a time. And like I said, you spend a bit of time the first time you come in, and then you're able to really automate a lot of this. So once you've done your reconciliations up to the point where you have questions for the client, Xero has a really great report. So I'm going to right click here and open that in a new tab. The bank account screen is what I'm going for. And I want this uncoded statement lines report for sharing any unreconciled transactions that you might have with your client. So it can give you more information. So if I export this to PDF after expanding the date range a little, I can see here that I have this editable PDF. So they can come in here and start to give you some information about what these transactions relate to. And then they can hopefully just back. At worst case, you call them up and they at least, you know, they're looking at the same information as you, and you can get some answers to your question. So another great feature here is you can get this export across multiple clients at a time. So if I click, I could select, maybe I have 5 clients that I need to send this reconciliation report to. I could select all 5 and export them all at once. So really handy report. So if I X that out and go back to my reconciliation screen, so I believe I mentioned earlier that you probably don't have client access to this screen. And the reason you wouldn't want to give your client access to this screen is because they might do something like that and send everything to the wrong account. So they think, oh, I finished my reconciliation, everything's swell and dandy. The books. So when you go to run your income statement and you see a bunch of stuff going to general expenses, you might want to come and fix that. So what's the best way in Xero? It would be this find and recode functionality. So find and recode allows you to search all of the transactions in the system and recode them in bulk. So there's a lot of conditions you can search based on, but some of my favorites are entered by, I like to keep an eye on Edward Sullivan. He's pretty fast and loose with the coding. So if I select him as a user, and then I know where he buries stuff is always in general expenses. So I can select that and I can really quickly see any transactions he's coded there. So really handy tool for finding those transactions, and you can really quickly recode all of them in one swoop. So we can send them all to in bulk. We can recode the contact. We can recode the account code with like we're going to do right now. This is a great one for clients that are doing meals and entertainment, and they're booking the full 13% for Ontario, and they're only allowed to deduct 6.5% all of those transactions and recode all of them to the proper tax. So a lot faster than opening each transaction individually, and a lot cleaner than doing an adjusting entry. And then this add here, this allows me to recode tracking categories. So tracking categories is very similar to classes or cost centers in other softwares. So it allows you to do departmental reporting, and which again, you can then start to differentiate within income statements and in other reporting in Xero. And I'll show you that in a few moments as well. For purposes of this example, I'm just going to send everything to advertising. So 14 transactions will get recoded in about 3 or 4 seconds here. To 1,000, I've heard 2,000 transactions at a time. If you do 1,000 transactions at a time, it might take 30 or 40 seconds. It won't happen in 3 or 4 seconds, but it does save a ton of time as opposed to having to open all of those and recode them. But if I click into one of the transactions, one of the best features in Xero is just how clean there is at the bottom of every transaction. There are these history and notes. So you can come down the bottom, you can see who did what, when. And one of the best things also is I can see how this was coded before it got fixed. So a ton of flexibility and the ability to transparency at the bottom here as far as who's done what when. So that is our find and recode functionality. The last thing I want to show you is a couple of reports. So if I jump into reports here, and I'm going to show 2 reports pretty briefly. So the first report I'm going to show is this account transactions report. This is essentially a general ledger report if you want to make it, but it has a lot more flexibility. So I could select all accounts if I wanted. Again, I could run a GL here, but I'm going to look at advertising. And I want to see anything that's hit advertising for this financial year. So if I click update, I can see all transactions that have hit that account. So I can rename it, but it's great. But really what I need is really just larger transactions that are hitting this account. So this is, if I create a filter, a lot of flexibility here. I can include the account code. I can group by account code. So we can group based on different things. But if I go to add a filter, I really just want to see anything that's over $200. So 200 to anything is the filter that I'm going to add there. And if I click update, I can now see any transaction that's over that amount that's hitting the account. So potentially a really nice to have some check accounts to certain accounts that you want to keep an eye on. And so if this is a report I'm going to create in the future more than once, I can save it as a custom report. And I can save it however I want, but greater than 200. And so I could make this the custom account transactions. I could make it the default report, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to save it as a separate custom report. And what that will do is make it accessible under the custom report tab. So if I go back to reports here and go to custom, I can see that custom report that I just created. Have to forgive, but there we go. So if I can star that, I can see it on my drop down now. So there it is, advertising over 200. So I'm going to show one more report here before I wrap up my presentation, and that is going to be a P&L. So let's jump into the P&L. And this is where the customizability becomes really helpful. So if I go to this financial year, I want to add a previous period and click update. I'd like this to say income statement. And, you know, there's a few things that I want to group here. Let's tweak a few things. So if I click on edit here, I can get into our layout editor. So this is a really great way to further customize the reports. And if you're in that reporting section, anything with the new over to the right is going to have this awesome editor. So if I click on this interest income, I can really easily drag and drop things into other parts of my income statement. So really simple to move things, easy too. I can group a number of accounts by holding the control key and really quickly sub account. And I can collapse that and just show it as a line item and not show that I've buried some accounts, or I can show it as a subtotal. I'm going to show it as a subtotal just so we can see it in the actual report. But if you look at the top here, there's a lot of customizability. We can add a text block at the bottom. So if you're doing advisory work, that can be a really great way to start to add some talking points for your advisory meetings. You can add a schedule. So if you have collapsed some accounts, you can show the breakout at the bottom. Another thing you can do is you can start to show some accounts at the bottom of an income statement. So maybe you want to start showing things like, start to get an idea of some different comparisons that might be valuable from an analysis standpoint. Footer is pretty self-explanatory. We can add a footer. Rows, you can have groups. I like holding the control key and selecting the accounts first. I think it's an effective way to create a group, but you could select group here, which will throw a group at the bottom that you can use. And then formula. So if you add formula, you can start to create gross profit percentage, things like that. I'm going to show formulas in the columns in a second, but you certainly could create additional rows with more formulas as well. So if I click on the columns here, I can add additional date columns. So I could add different cost centers, like I mentioned. Again, we call it tracking categories. You could add different tracking categories as columns to formulas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a formula. And what I want to do is I want to do a variance column. So I want to say 2019 minus 2018. I'm going to call it variance. So just really simple analysis that you can start to build into these reports. You don't need a PhD to figure out how to edit this stuff. Anyone on the team really, once they've gotten a little bit of training, can tweak this stuff. Another thing that is really handy is the ability to add a percentage. So people like to add sometimes maybe a percentage of trading income or a percentage of expenses. So yeah, it's pretty simple to start to add some of these columns and some of this analysis into these reports. So once I've done all the tweaks that I'm happy with the report, I'm going to click the Done button here. And that's going to let me see what this looks like. So I can export this to Google Sheets, Excel, or PDF, or I can publish the report to lock the numbers. But what I'm going to do here is save it as a custom report, similar to my previous report. And we're going to say percentage of trade income is what this report is going to be called. So I've now saved this custom report, so it's really easy to recreate. So a lot of customizability within the actual reporting here and how you can tweak some of those things. But I showed these client reports. All of this flexibility can be applied to our templates as well. So our templates look exactly the same as far as those report editors are concerned. It's just you're editing report codes as opposed to a chart of accounts. And then once you set up those report codes the way you want them, you then would map a chart of accounts within a client to those codes. And thus you could have any chart of accounts apply to the templates you create at the practice level. And so any templates you do create are going to show up under this advisor tab. So you can see some of the NTR and review templates that Xero has created here. But yeah, if you have questions about that or want additional follow-up or additional demos, I'm more than happy to handle that and to take that on. And we're excited to continue the conversation. So Alan and I will flash my email here at the end of it as well. If you have questions or want to potentially learn more, I'm excited to potentially continue that conversation. So yeah, I think we do have one more poll question. I have one last minute here. But what I'm going to do here is just flash my email address here. If anyone does have questions, please email me. I'm happy to set up a more in-depth demo for you. And like I said, continue the conversation. But yeah, if there are questions, please submit them to Alan and he will pass those along to me, and or you can directly email me here. But yeah, I'll pass it to Marilyn for the last poll question here. But yeah, appreciate the opportunity to present, and thank you, Alan and Marilyn, for your help.
Thanks, Teddy. We've put the last poll question up, folks. It's in regard to what you've just seen. Revolutionary technology coming to the accounting profession almost every day, and you can see that that's really been captured here with Xero. So when you think back to some of the things that Teddy showed you, what impressed you most? Reconciliation, reporting, report templates, collaborating with clients. Maybe some of you haven't given it the thought yet. It's not applicable to you. You don't have clients just yet. And that's fine too. Thanks very much for your votes. Everyone's quick off the mark to get back to their day. So I'm going to count you back from 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. I'm going to close the polls and share the results. There you go, Teddy. You've impressed them with the reconciliation reporting functionality for sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the opportunity, and we'll be back on in a couple of weeks. And please do check out the xero.com/roadshows to see the date on the roadshow near you. But hopefully we'll see a lot of you there.
Alan, I've just changed. There you are.
I'm back. Teddy, that was very, very interesting. I want to thank you for taking the time to do that. I want to thank the audience for their time. A reminder that when you exit the webinar, there's a short, very short questionnaire or survey that we'd appreciate you filling out. And then if you want additional information about securing your data, we have a 4-hour verifiable webinar called Securing Your Data. We also have one for implementing passwords. And just a bit of comic relief at the end. Good friend of mine wrote me today and said he's fed up with always having to remember passwords. So his password now is all one word, password not found. Reminder. And I can hear the groans. So on that note, thank you all, and I hope to see you next week when I will be doing advanced formatting. It's a wrap.